Well, it took a while, but I've finally gotten around to looking at the Mega Man games. I say games because this episode, as well as every other subsequent Mega Man episode I'll be releasing, will be looking at 2 games at a time. The reason for this, in case you didn't know, is because there are a lot of Mega Man games, and that's discounting all the side games and other shit that pads the main series, now up to 11 in case you didn't know. In that case, I may have to look at the last game by itself, although it is a new game, so it's quite unlikely that I'll actually look at it on this channel. Anyway, I guess we're just gonna have to wait and see, but for now, onward with the Mega Man 1 and 2 episode of Brad Fangled. Mega Man was one of the first NES games I ever saw, and this was at a time when I didn't have video games, so you can imagine how amazing Mega Man must have been. In this case, the first game in the series I laid eyes on was Mega Man 4. Well, in actuality, I knew it as it was known in Japan as Rockman 4. As I've mentioned in previous episodes, the official NES console was never released in South Africa. There was, however, a very large market for Chinese pirated consoles. We had one of those 8-bit Famicom family computers, so we received a lot of Japanese carts here. Anyway, Mega Man 4 was amazing. So amazing, in fact, that I had to have it. I never did, though. I did, however, get Mega Man 1 at Toys R Us, and while it wasn't the 4th installment, I didn't mind at all. I had a Mega Man game, and that was enough for me. A couple years later, I'd buy Mega Man 2 from a friend at school for $40, and later still I'd get the chance to play Mega Man 5. Created by Akira Kitamura, the first Mega Man game was released by Capcom in 1987, and the series has since built a reputation for being some of the toughest games around. And while there is certainly no shortage of tough-as-nails NES titles, Mega Man's unique boss ability stealing gameplay mechanics made it one of the most innovative titles ever released by Nintendo. For starters, what set Mega Man apart was the fact that you could choose the order of the levels to play, and this was an aspect that went hand in hand with the core mechanics of the game. Sure, you got games like Super Mario Bros. That allowed you to skip levels, but with Mega Man you got to dictate the starting point of the game, and there was a really clever reason for that. Each Mega Man game represents its levels by the end of level guardian, referred to as a robot master, created by the evil Dr. Wily, although in the first game's case, Dr. Wily reprogrammed Dr. Light's worker bots for evil, in order to combat Dr. Light's eponymous Mega Man. The key here though is to choose the right one first, but there's no indication as to which one that is, so you'll most likely pick whichever robot master looks the most appealing and try to beat his ass once you've traversed his level. At least one of the robot masters will be vulnerable to your Mega Buster, the default weapon, and once you've beaten that robot master, you'll acquire his abilities, which can then subsequently be used against another robot master who will be vulnerable to that ability. So for example, Electman is vulnerable to Cutman's Rolling Cutter, while Cutman himself is vulnerable to Gutsman's Super Arm. This adds a level of strategy and sophistication to the game the likes of which no other NES title could offer. It allowed players to dictate the best approach for playing the game, which in turn added to the overall longevity of the game, as you now had a multitude of ways to play the same game. This sophisticated play mechanic drew large inspiration from the rather simplistic hand game Rock, Paper, Scissors. How innovative. Once you've defeated all of the robot masters, you'll get the opportunity to fight through a series of final levels, eventually leading to a confrontation with the mad scientist himself, Dr. Wily. This formula has essentially been replicated across every subsequent release, Capcom only ever adding minor cosmetic changes or gameplay improvements, and yet each game always feels fresh and exciting. What the fuck is that? Mega Man has some of the tightest controls ever seen in a platform game. You can literally inch Mega Man along. And jump negotiation is pressure sensitive. The harder or longer you press, the higher you jump. Mega Man also doesn't spoon feed players. There were no tutorials or button layouts showing you what to do, and this was during a time where the internet wasn't readily available. You couldn't just Google what the controls were because you were too fucking stupid to figure it out. If you wanted to play the game, you needed to figure shit out yourself. And that's how it usually was. Gamers weren't treated like the blithering idiots developers seem to think they are today. The Mega Man games, while tough, were always fair. It used a simple run and gun playstyle, but the hazardous environments would always show gamers what to do, whether they knew it or not. You just had to pay attention to what was going on. So whether it was collapsing zipline platforms like in Gutsman's level, or disappearing platforms, if you pay attention to the rules and behavior of the environment, then you'd be able to negotiate the levels without issue. In the first Mega Man game, you were tasked with defeating 6 robot masters, the infamous Yellow Devil, Dr. Wily's first combat bot, and then Dr. Wily himself, and if you wanted to complete the game, it needed to be done in a single sitting. Mega Man 2 would introduce a password system, and variations of it would be carried over to subsequent releases, which would make the task of defeating the 8 robot masters, various sub-bosses, and getting to Dr. Wily slightly less taxing. Apart from being able to gain the Robot Master abilities, in the first Mega Man game you could find the Magnet Beam located in Electman stage, provided you had Gutsman's Strong Arm ability. The Magnet Beam could create magnetic platforms to jump on, but they disappeared very quickly, so you needed to be cautious about how you used it. Mega Man 2 introduced E-Tanks which replenish your health, as well as 3 transport items that would allow you to negotiate and overcome seemingly impossible scenarios. Of course, just like the Robot Master abilities, the 3 transport items could be depleted too. What? You thought you were just gonna zoom or float through the entire game? Unfucking likely. Despite Mega Man 2 having more Robot Masters, more sub-bosses, and a tougher Wily battle, Mega Man 2 is often regarded as the easiest Mega Man game, and is thus a good starting point for new players. I mean, just look at this shit. Enemies are dropping giant health capsules and extra lives like there's no fucking tomorrow, but you're gonna fucking need them. Visually, Mega Man 1 and 2 are remarkable looking games. Released towards the end of the 80s, the graphics were bright and colourful and the character designs were fantastic. The NES Mega Man sprite is still the best looking one in my opinion, even cooler than the SNES versions. I mean, just look at him, isn't he awesome? That's some sweet 8-bit graphics right there, and each Robot Master looks different from the next, really showcasing the skill and imagination of the artists and developers. I've played through both games numerous times and have yet to tire of them. They're just so much fun, and that's what a game should be. It's just an added bonus that it happens to look this good. I mean, just look at some of these sprites. It blows my mind that Mega Man 1 wasn't a commercial success. I mean, how the fuck did this thing fail? It's practically flawless, and yet it's sold poorly. Fuck. And then you have Mega Man 2, which is the best-selling game in the series, 1.5 million copies sold, and happens to be hailed as the greatest game in the series due to its overall improvement over the original, as well as its awesome soundtrack. And while the tunes certainly are fantastic, both musical scores are iconic. From the enemy chosen music of both games to the awesome introduction track of Mega Man 2, to the levels themselves, each track is as varied and interesting as the levels and Robot Masters they were composed for. So despite the lukewarm reception of Mega Man 1 and the fact that some publications refer to it as an overhard and unenjoyably frustrating platform nightmare, Mega Man went on to become one of the most successful gaming franchises in history. If I absolutely have to find fault with something here, it would undoubtedly be the Mega Man 1 and 2 cover art. What the fuck? What the fuck is this? What the fuck is going on here? Who drew this bullshit? My god, I have not seen a fucking abomination like this.
2 hours later.
These games are great. Play Mega Man. Play Mega Man now. And if you're indecisive as to what NES game to play next, Mega Man will make that decision for you. So like I said, play it. Play it now. It doesn't matter. If you're at work, fuck that. Just leave. Go home. Play the game. You'll thank me for it. Mega Man will thank you for it too. Well, that's it for this week. As always, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then please give it a thumbs up, comment, and most importantly, subscribe. And click that bell icon wherever it may be to ensure that you never miss an episode. Until next time, keep playing retro.